Do you feel anxious or confused when it comes to retirement? This is one of those pain point questions when you start thinking of a household. How much money do you have to set aside for retirement and to have financial security when you get into retirement? Now, according to Bipartisan Policy Center, over 50% of Americans lack the confidence or the ability to know exactly what they're going to do during retirement or know exactly what the comfortability is going to be during that point. And the reason for that is there is no magic number. When it comes to retirement, when it comes to retirement planning, it is not an exact science. There are going to be a lot of factors that we're going to be talking about in this video. So make sure you stay tuned. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and let's get into this video. Now, when we start thinking about the individual savings rate, it is going to change. It is going to vary greatly when you look at person to person, kind of based on things like income, when you started saving. So if you're starting to save at 25 or 45, it is going to make a big difference. And also there are two questions that are kind of impossible to really gauge. Number one, when are you going to stop working? Are you going to retire at 55, 60, 65, 70? That is going to make a really big difference. And the second one is the other side of that. How long are you going to live? If we had the answer to both these questions, retirement planning would be incredibly easy. If you said, I'm going to stop working at 65, I'm going to live till I'm 90, I need money until I'm 90, boom, we can run the numbers, we can run the math, knowing exactly how much you need makes it easy. But unfortunately, we don't have them. So what is the general guideline? Now, when we start thinking about bigger picture, 15% is the right place to start. That, of course, is a good place. When you start thinking of retirement planning, when you start thinking of income, there's going to be a point where, you start your career, you're 20, you're 25, you are starting out your career, putting 15% at a very low income. Let's say, again, you start out making $20,000, $30,000 a year. 15% might seem like a pretty big chunk, but at that point, you're not going to be making as large of contributions because, of course, you're not making as much money. Now, as you start getting more well-versed in your career, your 40s, 50s, 60s, you'll have a greater income. Hypothetically, if everything goes well, putting away 15% is going to build that nest egg a lot faster. So what exactly does this look like? When we think about people who are considered lower earners, earning less than $50,000 a year can probably save a lot less, saving roughly 10% instead of the 15%. Because when you start getting into, a lower tax bracket or even a lower earner, the chances are putting away 15% of your income, when you think of the cost of housing, the cost of food, all of the expenses, it can be incredibly difficult to sock away 15%, but 10% definitely viable, 5% at a very, very minimum. Now, this, of course, on the flip side of it, thinking of our high earners, people who are making over $200,000 a year, you're going to have to save roughly 20%. Now, the big disparity between this, so if you have an individual $50,000 a year, saving 10%, you have an individual making $200,000 a year, saving 20%, that is because of what exactly is the retirement going to look like and what do those expenses look like. Now, depending on where you are, there is a big disparity between Social Security and what exactly it's going to look like. If you are on the lower side of the tax bracket or a lower earner, retirement savings and Social Security is going to make up a big chunk of your retirement when you do get there. For a high earner, because Social Security does have a cap, the Social Security benefits are not going to have quite the impact because it might be the same pool of money, but you're used to a much larger pool. If you think of an individual that, let's say, is making $5 million a year, they're not even going to care about what they get monthly basis from Social Security. It won't even make a dent into what they have or what they really, the lifestyle that they're used to, earning at a very high level. Now, when you think about this, households also have to know roughly in kind of a basic idea how much they're saving towards retirement. What does it look like? Now, for me personally, a lot of people that I see going into retirement, the problem that I see is going into retirement with high expenses. So what I mean by this, so you hit 65, you're supposed to retire, you're all set, you leave your job, you still have a mortgage, you have car payments, you have credit card debt, you have unsecured loan, you have a bunch of debt going into retirement very, very quickly, going from a 9-to-5 job to a fixed income. If you're doing the combination of Social Security, if you have a pension plan, if you have an IRA, anything like that, what I have traditionally seen is people unfortunately just start taking massive amounts of money out of pension plans, or they start taking massive amount of money out of IRA plans. They start just liquidating a ton of it to eliminate the debt, to pay down the debt. Well, then all of a sudden their income gets reduced. Let's say you're used to making $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Now you're down to $2,800 a month with Social Security, which we know is taxed. Then you have Medicare or Medicaid, but you're not quite making that $2,800. So when you get to the point of, let's say, making 2,400, now your income is cut in half. Yes, your bills were reduced, but what happens essentially is the spending patterns have never changed. You are still used to a certain lifestyle. You still go out and spend. When we start looking at it in Social Security, even noted in this article, it's supposed to return about 50% of your income. And here they generally say having enough money to replace 70 to 75% of the salary that was earned, not including Social Security. So if you think about that and think about the numbers, so if you're making $100,000 a year, Social Security is giving you 35K. The disparity between that, you have to make up your other 65% or $65,000 out of an investment account if you're still staying at that $100,000 lifestyle. And of course, even when I look at my plan and my 401k, they estimate roughly needing 80% of the income. But again, it makes a big difference depending on how much debt you go into retirement. And of course, of that 45% or 45 percentage points come from savings. So about 45% of that being used in savings. And of course, the earlier that you start saving is the big thing. So they run through this scenario and I want to share this with you. So here's a basic example from Fidelity about how the calculator might work or what it might look like. So let's say a 25-year-old woman earns $54,000 a year, assuming a 1.5% range or raise each year. After inflation, she will be making $100,000 at age 67. Math there definitely works. Her savings would have to generate about $45,000 a year, adjusted for inflation to keep the same lifestyle at 67. So again, bringing her rate back up to that 100,000, or it says this figure is 45% of her 100,000 income before retirement, which is adequate according to Fidelity for a personal savings rate. So think about that. So you're making $100,000 a year, you retire at 67, you're going to have to replace 45% of that income or $45,000 a year just to have the exact same lifestyle. Since she currently gets a 5% dollar for dollar match in the 401k, she would need to save 10% of her income, starting with $5,400 the first year, for a total of 15% towards retirement. So thinking about this again, you have an individual that is earning $54,000 a year to start, putting away 15% and putting away 15% from age 25 to 67 makes a big difference. However, 15% won't necessarily be the guidance or the accuracy of it, depending on what the investment is. So kind of crazy to think that you could put away 15% of your income. You could essentially do that for 40 years and still not have enough on a monthly basis or even an annual basis to cover the expenses that you're going to have towards retirement, which in my opinion is kind of crazy. So this, in summary, guys, they talk about some general guidelines for retirement and how much you need to save. So starting early, saving often is the main thing. So the more that you can afford and the more that you can put away essentially in retirement early, and doing this on a consistent basis will of course start the snowball, will start the compounding interest. If you can't save 15%, look at 10. If you can't save 10, look at 5. Even putting 1% away can start the habit of putting away and saving money, cutting costs and saving anywhere you can. Every time you get a raise, put a portion in there. So for instance, if you get a 3% raise, put 1% rate into that 401k, move it up a little bit, and then you still got a 2% raise. 1% went to the 401k, and trust me, the future will thank you. Now, number 4 that we talk about, most people invest too conservatively. Now, this is something that we've shared and we've shared quite a bit. When it comes to the conservative nature of investments, when you start looking at a mix of stocks, bonds, everything else, it can grow adequate over decades. But when you get to retirement, a lot more goes into bonds, a lot more safer. And a lot of places are saying, looking at today's data, that is totally wrong. When it comes to investing and when it comes to retirement, you should stick in a 100% stock portfolio, looking at ETFs, looking at all of these growth. Target date funds are not optimal for everyone, but you still do need growth. So again, if you think of an individual that is retiring at 65, is going to live till 90, you still need to get growth for 25 years to maintain that lifestyle and making sure your portfolio is exceeding or really continuing to grow, which is kind of crazy, while taking full advantage of 401k plans, IRA plans, HSA accounts, a lot of those. We do not want the retirement funds that are going to be eroded by taxes in the future, which is kind of crazy. And of course, looking at some of the retirement You have to be careful when it comes to pension plans. Even locally here, we have seen a lot of pension plans that have changed, that have moved to a 401k plan where some people are grandfathered in, new people are not in there. And also remember the final note on this one, the vesting rule. If you're with a company and they have a vesting period, most of them will be 2 or 3 years, meaning you are not entitled to any of those funds until that time frame does really lapse. So guys, when it comes to how much money do you need for retirement, it is going to be variable based on how much money you earn, what kind of lifestyle and what kind of really rich lifestyle you want to have during retirement. If you're looking at travel and also knowing how much and how big the expenses are when you go into retirement. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.